Hello, and thank you for joining us again at Voice of Rohingya Radio, a registered nonprofit media broadcast coming to you from the state of Oregon in the United States of America. We act as the media wing of the Arakan Rohingya Union, providing exclusive interviews, reports from inside the border, and the latest news from reputable sources from around the world. We'd like to ask you to take a moment and go to www.vorradio.org for up-to-date news and information concerning this program and how you can get involved. Voice of Rohingya Radio is the only news source of its kind in the English-speaking world. You can learn more about the Rohingya cause by supporting us today, and we'll continue bringing you the latest news in a convenient format and keeping you informed and involved. You can listen to our program each week, Sundays at 7 p.m. Pacific Time, and if you're interested in sponsoring our program, simply log on to our website or send us an email to support@vorradio.org. It is February 15th, 2015. For Voice of Rohingya Radio, I'm your host, Zach Taylor. In our first story today, a top U.S. official has stepped into the controversy over the Myanmar government's invalidation of temporary ID cards, saying the move did not help with reconciliation. U.S. Assistant Secretary for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, Mr. Tom Malinowski, sent out a tweet on February 12th in which he said invalidating the white cards for Rohingya in Myanmar is counter to reconciliation in Rakhine State and the inclusive elections the Myanmar government says it wants. Myanmar President Thein Sein declared on February 11th that the temporary ID cards held by about 1.5 million people would be invalidated on March 31st, calling on holders to hand in the cards. The about-face happened after an earlier decision that would have allowed white card holders to vote in the upcoming constitutional referendum. Many Buddhist nationalists took to the streets to protest, angry that minority Muslim Rohingya, whom they refer to as Bengali, would be allowed to vote. On the same day Mr. Malinowski sent out his tweet, the chief minister of Rakhine State called representatives of about 20 foreign NGOs operating in his territory to his office to warn them not to interfere in the controversial white card issue. Both the Rakhine State authorities and the Myanmar government have acted with anger over foreign criticism and claimed interference into the status of Muslim Rohingya. Mr. Malinowski has previously raised his concerns with the Myanmar authorities over the dangers posed by stoking religious divisions and the problem of keeping a part of the population disenfranchised. The Director General of the Arakan Rohingya Union, Dr. Waqar Uddin, tweeted his response on revoking the white card voting resolution in the Myanmar parliament from the United Arab Emirates, writing, "Burmese government did it again. President Thein Sein, parliament, monks, all pre-planned from the very beginning." Our sources on the ground in Myanmar are saying that the decision made by the government has triggered diverse speculations about the future course leading to Rohingya citizenship. Our source says all temporary identification cards across Myanmar are to be surrendered by April 31st. The majority of the Rohingya population falls under this category as successive military governments stopped using genuine citizenship cards and started issuing white cards to Rohingyas living in Arakan for the last 20 years. One source said that the citizenship law of 1982 was enacted to downgrade Rohingyas from genuine citizens to temporary citizens, which ultimately led to their statelessness. The white cards were issued to those Rohingyas who formerly held national registration cards, which were issued under the 1949 and 1951 Citizenship and National Registration Acts. After formulation of the 1982 citizenship law, white cards were introduced beginning in 1990 to Rohingyas who held national registration cards. Now Rohingyas are rendered stateless and all citizenship rights have been curtailed. Our source said Rohingyas cannot rely on any actions made by the government as a high degree of mistrust remains within the Rohingya community and called for close monitoring by the international community to see that genuine citizenship cards are issued to all Rohingyas. In other news, Switzerland-based Center for Humanitarian Dialogue recently invited some Rohingya activists to a 3-day workshop in Rangoon under the name of Strategy Workshop Presentations and Visions for Rohingya Community, February 7th through the 10th. The workshop detailed 5 main priorities, including equal rights, security and rule of law, peaceful coexistence, social and economic rights, and good governance. The vision of the workshop was for all of Myanmar to enjoy equal rights, harmony, mutual respect, recognition of identity, and peaceful coexistence in a pluralistic society characterized by socio-economic development. The dialogue included steps to achieve its vision, such as mapping the complete Rohingya population, building networks of leaders of all faiths amongst communities, implementing co-ownership tea shop programs to provide a safe environment to discuss peaceful coexistence, and including good governance training and civic education programs. In other news, many Rakhians demonstrated on the 15th when they gathered at Maungda Stadium at 12 p.m., where speeches by ANP and USDP members were given. At 1 p.m., a police-escorted march began with participants holding placards and shouting. Along the main road, some of the slogans read, "If Rakhine is disintegrated, bombers will cry." The citizenship law of 1951 has been denounced. Send Bengalis to third countries. And those who engage in issuing nationality pink cards are our enemies. The march ended at 2 p.m. when the procession arrived back at the stadium. Most of the Rakhines were from different rural areas and were paid in food and cash for their participation. You are listening to Voice of Rohingya Radio. Thanks again for listening to Voice of Rohingya Radio, your source for Rohingya news. We'd like to remind you to visit vorradio.org, where you can get involved and show your support. Voice of Rohingya Radio has received a report of extortion using Rohingya by a military major. On February 10th, Major Naen Chan Aung, a senior officer of the Border Guard Police, stationed in Gadu Tara village 6 miles south of Maungda, and his party surrounded a mosque while villagers were praying and attempted to arrest innocent villagers to extort money. According to the report, many villagers fled the mosque while 2 were arrested. When the villagers screamed seeking help, indiscriminate shots were fired in complete darkness. At the time of the report, many villagers were hiding in the jungle. Subsequently, 10 truckloads of fully armed security officials rushed to the scene and terrorized the villagers who were trapped in their homes, unable to leave. The report claims that Major Nien Chang Ong has been extorting money from the villagers of Gadu Tara and surrounding villages for the last 6 months. Recently, he and his team extorted $15,000 US from 13 villagers in Du Chiredan and nearly $4,000 US alone from one villager in Gadu Tara village. The report says that the major is threatening the villagers with long-term jail sentences if the money is not paid, warning the villagers that their name is, quote, on the list. Many villagers worry that if this does not stop, they will be forced out of their homes through fear and intimidation. The report noted that Major Nien Chan Aung is a Rakhine Buddhist extremist and pleaded for help before it is too late. In other news, a correspondent for the Burma Times wrote yesterday that 7 Bangladeshi Rakhine men arrested by Border Guard Bangladesh have confessed that they were going to Arakan to convene with an anti-Muslim group. The men were arrested on the Naf River with around $8,000 US on February 7th as they tried to cross over to Burma, where they were then handed over to the Bangladeshi police. During interrogation, they confessed to their association with a Rakhine nationalist group and said the money was meant for them. They also said the group was planning anti-Rohingya activities in Arakan state. On February 7th, the European Rohingya Council convened a conference in Oslo, Norway on Rohingya politics and human rights and their ethnic identity in Burma. The invited guest speakers included Dr. Nora Rowley, a physician and independent humanitarian worker, and Dr. Waqar Uddin, Director General of the Arakan Rohingya Union, among others, with U Hla Tin, the ERC Secretary General, delivering the closing remarks. Nora Rowley, who dedicated her career in Rohingya relief work in Arakan for nearly 10 years and worked intermittently in Rohingya IDP camps in Arakan State, Burma, and in Malaysia for several months, reported on long-standing serious alleged corruption and exploitation of Rohingya victims in IDP camps and refugee camps. She gave detailed accounts of the prolonged registration process for UNHCR refugees, allegations of corruption and harassment and arrests of unregistered and UNHCR registration cardholders by Malaysian security forces. Dr. Rowley also described the UNHCR Malaysia system of placing highly vulnerable new Rohingya refugees in protective care under Rohingya community leaders who have been known to be serious criminals reportedly involved in human trafficking and other exploitation of Rohingya refugees. She added that paralyzed and otherwise sick Rohingya survivors of human trafficking have been placed in successive UNHCR-funded dirty shelters with abusive caretakers, lack of appropriate treatment of their illness and injuries, and the UNHCR continuing to fund and place sick and other vulnerable Rohingya under the same Rohingya caretaker in the same dirty shelter. Dr. Waqar Uddin provided a global perspective on Rohingya political and human rights issues. He provided the insights to the fundamental causes of the ethnic cleansing of Rohingya ethnic minority by the government of Burma that has resulted in the revocation of their citizenship, annulment of the Rohingya ethnic identity, and major human rights violations against Rohingya. Dr. Uddin explained how 50 years of hostile policy of the government of Burma towards Rohingya people has fed into the cycles of violence by radical Buddhist monks and Rakhine mobs, which has rendered over 140,000 people displaced in the country. He provided the accounts of how Arakan Rohingya Union has coordinated the global advocacy for the rights of Rohingya with the international community and advanced the cause through the OIC, U.S. government, United Nations General Assembly, Human Rights Commission, and OCHA, European Union, and numerous NGOs. Dr. Uddin explained the details of the U.S. Congressional Resolution, UN General Assembly Resolution, and the UN Special Rapporteur's report and their impacts on the Burmese government's handling of the Rohingya issue. He also highlighted the current obstacles and possible strategies for finding a durable solution to the issues faced by the Rohingya people. Finally today, heavy fighting between Myanmar's army and rebels has killed 47 soldiers, state media said Friday, sending a flood of people across the border with China and overshadowing hopes for a national ceasefire as crucial elections loom. Myanmar has informed Beijing about the clashes, which have raged since February 9th, according to the Global New Light of Myanmar, marking a dramatic resurgence of conflict with largely ethnic Chinese rebels in the Kokang region of Shan State. So far, the fighting has left the government forces with 47 dead, 73 wounded, and 5 vehicles destroyed, said the English-language report. It is unclear what provoked the latest round of violence, which was announced as the nation celebrated the 100th anniversary of the birth of independence hero Aung San, the father of opposition leader Aung San Suu Kyi, who is lauded for backing political autonomy for ethnic areas. Information Minister Ye Tut blamed local Kokang rebel leader Phong Kia-shin for the fighting and called on Beijing to rein in any local officials who might be helping the group on their side of the border. Myanmar's army, which has rarely admitted to such large casualties in the past, launched 5 rounds of airstrikes in its assault on the Kokang fighters, state media reporters said, detailing a litany of attacks by the rebels, including the shelling of a military base in the Kongyang area. Independent analyst Richard Horsey said the fighting was likely to continue. Myanmar, which has more than 130 recognized ethnic minorities, has suffered the world's longest civil war, with pockets of unrest breaking out soon after independence in 1948. The army, which seized power in 1962, used the unrest as a justification for its iron-fisted rule and has been accused of widespread human rights abuses in border areas, where tussles over abundant resources have further fueled fighting. Observers say a well-trailed general election expected for late 2015 adds urgency to the talks. Thanks again for listening to Voice of Rohingya Radio, a weekly news program bringing you up-to-date information about the Rohingya people in Myanmar. You can catch our broadcast every Sunday night at 7 p.m. Pacific Time here in the United States by logging on to vorradio.org, or you can join our page on Facebook to find more information on the program. For Voice of Rohingya Radio, this is Zach Taylor, signing out.